Before sunrise, fog moves low across a valley in the American West. Cattle drift through it like ghosts. A ranch house sits alone beneath a sky so big it makes the buildings look like an afterthought. Fence lines disappear into the horizon. Nothing here seems to move fast. Nothing here seems urgent. And yet, somewhere in a closing room hundreds of miles away, a buyer just signed papers for land like this. Land that, on paper, produces almost nothing you could hold in your hand. No factory, no inventory, no storefront. Just grass, fences, cattle, silence. So ask yourself the question that started this investigation. Why would anyone pay millions of dollars for land that appears to be doing nothing more than sitting there? And if your answer is, because ranchers make money selling cattle, you're about to find out why that explanation barely scratches the surface. This is the story of what a ranch actually is. Not what it looks like from the highway, what it actually is. Let's start with the number that doesn't make sense. Buying a large American ranch can mean spending anywhere from several $100,000 to tens of millions, depending on size, location, and resources. But owning it, that's a different kind of expense entirely. Land taxes, fencing that stretches for miles and constantly needs repair, water systems, equipment that breaks in the worst possible season, veterinary bills, fuel, labor, insurance, and weather, the one variable no rancher can control, and the one most likely to wipe out a year's plans in a single storm. Here's the uncomfortable truth most outsiders never hear. Owning thousands of acres does not automatically make you rich. In many cases, it makes you cash poor and land rich, a phrase ranching families use so often it barely registers anymore. So if the operation itself is expensive, unpredictable, and sometimes barely profitable in a given year, why do some of the wealthiest people in America still want to own one? Because the cattle might be producing income, but the land itself may be doing something much bigger. To understand that, you have to stop thinking of a ranch as a farm. Start thinking of it as a machine. One that doesn't run on diesel or electricity, but on scarcity. A ranch isn't just acreage, it's location, it's water rights, it's grazing capacity, it's the legal ability or inability to build, subdivide, or develop. It's proximity to growing cities, recreation corridors, or protected wilderness that will never be built on again. And it's something increasingly rare in this country. A single, uninterrupted stretch of land large enough that no one can chop it into 100 smaller pieces. That last part matters more than almost anything else in this story. Because there is a difference, a critical difference, between land that produces income and land that simply is valuable. A ranch can sit quietly for years, producing modest returns from cattle, while its underlying value as an asset moves in a completely different direction. Which brings us to the animals everyone assumes are the whole story. Cattle do generate revenue. That part is true. But revenue is not profit, and that distinction is where most outside assumptions about ranching fall apart. Cattle prices swing with global markets. Herd sizes shrink during droughts and expand during good years. Feed costs eat into margins. Transportation adds more. Disease can devastate a herd in weeks. And ranchers are essentially running a business with pricing they don't control, expenses they can't predict, and a product that can die before it ever reaches market. It's a real business, a demanding one, but it's rarely the reason a ranch is worth 8 or 9 figures. So if cattle alone can't explain the value of these properties, what else is happening on the land? The answer starts with something most people drive past without a second thought: water. In much of the American West, water isn't just a resource. It's the difference between land that's barely usable and land that's extraordinarily productive. Wells, streams, irrigation access and, depending on the state, legally recognized water rights can transform the entire economic character of a property. Because water law varies dramatically from state to state, no single rule applies everywhere. But the underlying principle holds true almost universally. 1,000 acres without dependable water is one kind of asset. 1,000 acres with it can be something else entirely. What looks like empty grassland from a passing car might contain one of the most valuable resources on the entire property, invisible, unassuming, and quietly worth a fortune. But water isn't the only hidden layer. There's another one, and it's counterintuitive enough to surprise even seasoned investors. Sometimes, the smartest financial decision an owner can make isn't to build something on the land. It's to leave it exactly as it is. Some ranch owners participate in conservation programs, agricultural land classifications, or easements that affect how a property can be used, taxed, or developed in the future. These arrangements vary enormously by state, by property, by owner, and they don't apply universally. Not every ranch benefits from special treatment, and not every owner chooses this path. But for those who do, an idea emerges that runs counter to almost everything we're taught about business. Sometimes preserving an asset, rather than developing it, is the more sophisticated financial move. In a country where undeveloped, contiguous land is disappearing every year, choosing not to build can be its own kind of strategy. Which raises an obvious question. If it's not just about farming, and not just about development rights either, what exactly are people buying? Increasingly, the answer is something closer to identity than industry. For a certain class of wealthy American buyer, a ranch isn't primarily a business. It's a lifestyle asset, a private retreat, a legacy property meant to be handed down. A place where hunting, fishing, and horseback riding aren't hobbies, they're the entire point. These buyers aren't chasing quarterly cattle profits, they're chasing something money struggles to buy anywhere else in America. Total privacy, staggering scale, and land that will likely never see another house built on it. But here's where the story shifts again. Because a ranch doesn't have to choose between being a home and being a business. What happens when it becomes both? Depending on location and setup, certain ranches generate income far beyond cattle. Hunting leases, fishing access, guided outdoor experiences, overnight ranch stays, private events, film and photography locations, hospitality ventures built around the land itself. Some properties even explore agricultural partnerships or land use agreements tied to renewable energy when geography allows. Not every ranch does all of this, some do none of it. But for the ones that layer multiple income streams onto a single property, a pattern starts to emerge, and it's the real secret at the center of this entire story. It was never about finding one dramatic, hidden source of income. It's about a single piece of land learning to serve 5 or 6 different economic purposes at once: cattle operation, water asset, conservation vehicle, recreational retreat, and long-term real estate, all stacked on top of each other, all increasing what the land is worth without necessarily increasing what it costs. And that idea leads to the deepest revelation in this documentary, the one that explains why families fight to keep these properties for generations, even when the cattle business alone would never justify it. You can build another hotel, manufacture another product, launch another company next year if the first one fails. You cannot manufacture another piece of land in exactly this place, with exactly this water, exactly this view, and exactly this scarcity. That singularity, the simple fact that this specific land cannot be recreated anywhere else on Earth, is what turns a ranch from an operating business into generational wealth. The land appreciates, the business produces some income, the lifestyle has its own value, and the family holds on, year after year, not because the spreadsheet always makes sense, but because what they're protecting cannot be bought back once it's gone. Zoom out far enough, and a pattern about the entire American land market comes into focus. A ranch can sit at the intersection of agriculture, real estate, conservation, recreation, and wealth preservation. 5 different financial worlds, all converging on the same acreage. That intersection is where the real value lives. Not in any single revenue stream, but in the rare ability to control a large, irreplaceable piece of American land, the kind of asset that grows scarcer every single year, in a country that isn't making any more of it. The biggest secret was never how much money cattle could generate. It's how valuable the control of scarce land can quietly become. So picture that ranch again, the fog, the cattle, the fence lines stretching to the horizon, the farmhouse standing alone under an enormous sky. At first glance, it still looks simple, quiet, almost sleepy. But now you know what's underneath it. The cattle operation running its slow, risky cycle. The land itself appreciating in silence. The water invisible but decisive. The conservation status that might be shaping its future. The recreational value drawing in guests who will never see a single cow. The sheer, unrepeatable scarcity of the location. The legacy a family is quietly protecting for the next generation. What looks like empty land from the highway can look completely different on a balance sheet. Because the real business of a ranch was never just what happens on the land. It's what the land makes possible. The richest asset in America isn't always the one producing the most income today. Sometimes it's simply the one that's rare, useful in more than one way, nearly impossible to replace, and capable of generating value long after the people who bought it are gone. A ranch may look like thousands of acres of open space, but behind those fences could be one of the most complicated businesses in America, and the cattle were only ever the beginning. So here's the question worth sitting with. If you suddenly had $10 million, would you buy a ranch? Or would that money go somewhere else entirely? Let us know what you do. Some answers might surprise you more than you expect.